Hi, welcome to the Life's Worth Living podcast. I'm your host, John Gossett. Thanks for coming back for another week and another episode. We'd like to thank our sponsor of the podcast, GTM Builders, for making this possible by allowing us to record in their beautiful model home. If you're looking at building, reach out to GTM Builders or visit gtmbuilders.com or visit one of the model homes in Tooele County. They are Tooele County's premier home builder. Tonight's episode is brought to you by A. Warner Homes Real Estate. If you're looking at selling or buying, interest rates are great right now. Reach out to A. Warner Homes Real Estate or contact them at 801-867-5078. So I'm excited about tonight's podcast. I have a friend coming tonight, Laura Warburton with Live Hannah's Hope. I'm excited you came out. You came all the way down from the big city of Huntsville to hang out with me tonight. So thanks for coming.
Thanks for taking me out of the hills.
Well, you're welcome to the desert.
Yes.
Well, I'm excited to introduce you to the viewers and listeners of the podcast and talk a little bit about your story. If you don't mind, kind of take me back. I know your story, but was there anything prior to the story that I know, any suicides in the family that prior to Hannah's?
No.
Okay.
No.
Well, take me back kind of to, when you first started to see some of the signs and start out at the very beginning of Hannah's story for me. Tell me how that went.
So Hannah's my daughter, and when she was 16, she died by suicide. And her story, you look back to when after she died, I started looking at everything, and I realized that when she was born, she had a concussion. She was born not breathing. And then after that, when she was 4, she got stitches in her frontal lobe, and pretty severe. And then she actually, when she was a baby, she would have seizures. And so we tried to evaluate that, and they seemed to go away. And it wasn't until I was working at the legislature on some bills for the Utah Epilepsy Association that I realized that she was having drop seizures the entire time. So she was having these brain issues all the time. What that presented as, now that I look back, is depression. Mm-hmm. So in 2014, we really didn't know anything about concussions, brain damage. Anytime somebody was having suicidal thoughts, ideation, it was always because they were mentally ill. Now, mental illness obviously can take the form of a concussion, or a concussion can take a form of mental illness, present as, and that's what was happening, but nobody knew that then. And then when she was 14, almost 15, she got into a car crash. And she had a brain bleed for 2 days that went undiagnosed. Wow. And by the time I got her back in the hospital and we did an MRI, they saw that it had resolved itself. And from that point on, it was 18 months and her complete personality changed. She was a different child. And at that time in life, I mean, she's a young woman, becoming a young woman. Girls are very emotional. I can say that. I am one. Daughters, I have 2 sons. They're very different than sons. So I just thought she was going through that stage in life. But she changed a lot. She was spiritual before. We're LDS. And when President Monson announced that girls could go on missions when she was 19, she tweeted that out, that she was so excited. I had always raised all my kids to have a relationship with Heavenly Father on their own, to recognize the Spirit, even by simple things like, I can't find my shoes, Mom. Well, why don't you pray and have the Spirit show you? Mm-hmm. To me, that was more important than anything. And she did it. She did it well. It was her relationship. And after the concussion, it's like it disappeared. She couldn't hear God anymore. And I've since learned that there's a great book called A Ghost in My Brain. And I can't remember the author. It's A Ghost in My Brain. I have it on my website. And it's the first book of its kind, I think the only book of its kind. The man was brilliant. He was a academic. He created or studied at major colleges and developed artificial intelligence. And he got a very slight concussion. And because of his IQ, which was right around 165, he was able to watch what happened with the concussion on one side of his brain and actually experience it on the other. Wow. And he documented all of his experience in this book. Again, A Ghost in My Brain. And he talks about science identifying a spot in the brain that actually is spiritual. And that he said he was spiritual. And that when he had his concussion, he could no longer hear God. And he couldn't figure out why God had abandoned him. So for a 14-year-old girl, 15 and 16-year-old girl, who is being taught that God loves her and will answer her prayers, and she's feeling depression and anxiety, worse than she's ever experienced it before, and she's praying and asking for help, and she's feeling nothing, getting nothing, it's pretty discouraging. And she even went behind our back and took missionary lessons. And later on, the missionaries told us that she stopped. She said she couldn't feel anything. And I know that played a tremendous role in her depression and in her hopelessness. So what ended up happening is that we knew that she was struggling. And so we took her to therapists. We took her to psychiatrists. She begged for medication. I am very leery of medication. I am not anti-medication. I feel like kids are underdiagnosed and overmedicated and undermanaged. Yeah. So we did that, though. We got her medication. We were willing to do anything that she needed. And she went to therapy. And things just kept on getting worse. She couldn't go to school. She had to be home in hospital. That means that in the high school setting, they send a tutor home. She was a straight A student. She was student body officer when all this happened. She loved people, loved them a lot, but people started to make fun of her a little bit. And she had come from a background of being bullied somewhat because we moved from Layton up to Huntsville, and it wasn't a real smooth transition. Yeah. But she overcame that to become elected as student body president. So she took her studies very seriously, very self-motivated, and when she couldn't even remember how to do a math problem, she got very discouraged. So all this hopelessness, well, I didn't understand. I thought we were taking her to a doctor, and I knew that she was suicidal. We knew that. I didn't know how serious she was about it. I didn't understand that I could ask her if she had a plan. If I understood then what I understand now, it would have been a whole nother story. Yeah. And isn't that the way it works? It works that let me just finish what happened. So what happens with people, not just kids, but with people that have ideation, is that usually there's something that triggers the very last thing. And my dad died. And that triggered it. And a month later, Hannah decided on her own. She came to me and said, I want to be off the medication. And in her suicide note, she said, if I have to feel numb for the rest of my life, I don't want to live. I have to live this way. So I took myself off the medication. That is a big no-no. And I told her, don't take yourself off of it. We'll titrate you down. And that's the way it should be, because it chemically alters your brain. So she didn't. She was pretty stubborn and independent. And I've worked with so many parents now. And so many parents literally didn't even know their children had ideation, didn't even know they were heading towards there. Some did. Yeah. Not all. But even some that do, it's still such a shock when it happens. And you look back and I can see this, I can't see the signs of that day. But I remember the day so well. I remember the feeling of coming home from getting my hair done. She was home. We'd been texting all day. She was home alone. That is not a good thing for kids that are, and we tried really hard not to leave her alone at home, because you don't want to leave somebody who has ideation alone, not when they're serious or have a plan. But I went and voted and talked with the lady for quite a while. And I remember thinking after that, I wish I'd never opened my mouth to her. Came home, her car was on, or not on, but her car was in the garage, and she wasn't home, which was so strange because of the car accident, she had PTSD and needed a car because she worked up at the ski resorts and loved that. It was part of the things that gave her relief. So we got her a nice car that would, and so of course she took her friends everywhere. And walking through the house, I just knew something was wrong, but I couldn't find her. And then when I finally did find her, she had already passed. So
sorry.
Yeah, thank you. It's it's been 6 years.
Yeah.
But I can go right back there and be there. And yet so much has changed in that 6 years. So I don't think that I will ever not be able to find the pain. But there are certain things that I have done that has mitigated the grieving process in a way that's been healthy, and I've been able to be resilient. Mm-hmm. And so, and the biggest thing for anybody out there that is going through this, that's lost a child, is that you don't do what ifs. Do you remember Wade Fairway?
I remember the name.
Okay. Amazing man. And he worked up at the Capitol, and at this time he worked in the AG's office. And
yes, I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Tough guy. He always scared me to death. When he was at everything political, he just scared me. He turned out to me one of my greatest supports, and he just kept on saying to me, Laura, no what ifs, no what ifs. But my problem with that was that I've gone through so many things in my life, and I've learned from all of them, right? So I couldn't have my daughter die from suicide and not learn from it.
Yeah.
I couldn't do that. So what I came up with 6 years ago was that, okay, I'm going to learn from it. So not what if, but because of. So because of Hannah, I started asking questions. Because of Hannah, I honored my own grief. I never even read one book, because there wasn't any books of any parents that had lost their children to suicide. I'm just starting mine now, and probably use some prayers that I'd be able to get through it, as I'm not sure. But there wasn't one book. And plus, I didn't want to read somebody else's experience, which is part of the reason why I haven't written a book. But I have to also realize that people are not always like me, and someone may really want to read somebody else's experience. Yeah. So started Live Hannah's Hope, looked at the problems that existed, and then took my contacts at the Capitol, and we just went to town. We just started to implement legislation, helped pass the SafeUT app, helped implement it, sat on that commission for a year, changed the Emmy, gave a suggestion of how to change up the Emmy's office so there would be forensic forensic, I have hydrosyphilis, be patient with me. I'm doing really good. Forensic autopsies. Yeah, autopsies. And so every child now, every person now that dies from suicide has a full forensic autopsy done with every parent. To me, we can't fix a problem unless we really know why this is happening. And you can't do that with the kind of stats that we were getting before, because no one even asked me if she had concussions. And that's the reason why she died, is because of her brain damage due to concussions, multiple. And so no one's looking at that if no one's asking me, if that's not on any statistical information. And what I realized right away was that the police are the ones, and I love the police. I love my first responders. And they were so good and gentle with me when they came. And then the detectives that did the follow-up, which they have to do. Anytime there's an unattended death, they have to do an investigation. But they never asked me any of those questions. So that was really concerning to me. So we changed that. I got the suggestion. It was hard because I had to wait a few years until Representative Elison was like, okay, now it's time. Anyway, and he didn't even tell me he was doing it, but at least I was there at the signing. Were you there at the signing?
I wasn't, but I remember.
Yeah, and it was pretty amazing. So I was happy about that. And then the first thing we did was I asked if therapists had training in suicide prevention, because my therapist for Hannah did not call me and tell me how truly suicidal she was, and she should have.
Yeah.
She didn't. And so they weren't, and they're scared to death of suicide. They don't even know how to ask the question, are you suicidal? They're afraid of it. And I found everybody was.
Yeah.
So we changed the law so it required them to have every 2 years a minimum of 2 hours of education. And then I got trained in QPR, which you are too, and SafeTalk, which you are too. And I wouldn't even teach QPR because there was no references, there was no referrals to speak of until we got SafeUT. Yes. And so that made a big difference. Started my nonprofit.
And how soon after Hannah's passing did you start Live Hannah's Hope?
Man, I was pushed right away because I realized at her viewing Hannah was always telling me that nobody liked her and she didn't have any friends. We started the viewing about 30, 40 minutes early because there was such a long line. I was completely out of it. I had no idea who was there, who wasn't there. But it went almost 2 hours over, and they had to shut it down with at least 2 hours of people waiting. Wow. And every single person that came through that knew Hannah, and it was the majority of them, said the same thing. If I had known, I could have helped her. And I realized, Hannah helped me change the laws in bullying. She testified. She helped me with the homeless youth programs. I had taught her that to alleviate her pain, to help other people. And isn't that what we're taught? We're taught that to forget your own pain, to help other people. The problem with that is that you're a person too.
Yeah. So
I realized that I had taught her that. So I decided right then and there at the viewing that I would mourn out loud. Because before that, I was like, I've got this political career going, I was heading towards getting elected. That was on the slate for me. And that brings all kinds of issues to the table, and doing legislation, I learned to be very careful and not so much not to offend, but to include everybody. And the more people you get at the table, the better off the legislation. I thoroughly enjoyed all that. And I thought, what if I go tell people that my daughter killed herself? I would lose all credibility. People wouldn't want to talk to me anymore. I would be that terrible failure of a mom. What could she possibly know? Who could she possibly help? And I thought, nope. I'm going to mourn out loud. And what happened was astonishing. People wanted to talk. They wanted to talk about it. They wanted to talk about their mental illness. They wanted to have light. Hundreds of people contacted me in the background. Kids and parents, and it wasn't just all smooth and I had to deal with kids that were telling me they were suicidal, and I have to go to parents who what do I know? I've lost my child. Why should they listen to me? And parents that were in complete denial, and very popular parents that were in complete denial, and some that even tried to blame me for their child's illness, which it wasn't. And all I could do was keep talking to those kids and keep loving them. And we didn't lose one of Hannah's friends. We didn't have one bit of contagion.
Thank goodness.
And that was a miracle, because there was not one chair in the stake center available. They were in the hallways, on the stage. There was not one chair, and it wasn't for me. I thought if they came to the viewing, they wouldn't come because who does that, right? I go to the viewing or I go to the funeral.
Yeah.
And so when I walked in that chapel and saw everybody, because you're not supposed to have. We even still had to ask, can we have a funeral in the chapel for someone who kills themselves? It was still that way.
Really?
Yes, in 2014. And so my stake president actually had 4 people in his immediate family die of suicide.
Prior or after?
Prior.
Wow.
And he spoke. He was there. Can't tell me that God didn't know that and didn't put that in place. He had he'd been in about 6 months when that happened. Wow. Absolutely amazing. So people wanted to talk, and I realized that. And so I just kept on just sharing my grief. I just was honest and honest and honest. And I just keep being honest.
That's all you can do.
It is.
So one of the questions I have is, she felt that nobody liked her. Do you think that was from the brain injury?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, your mind tells you, and it happens with people with, their brain is sick. They start to hear things that maybe aren't true.
Right.
And so they're very hard on themselves and feel badly that they're, and it's all in the way that they're looking at it. Nobody thought that about her, obviously.
No. And I was like, Hannah, I guess you know now. One of the things that I do when I talk to large groups of kids is I do QPR, but not when it's super large, right? Because it's dangerous.
Yeah.
And we trigger kids. So we always have things in place when we talk to kids. But I do the work of Byron Katie inquiry, which is 4 questions and 3 turns. Are you familiar with it?
Yeah.
You are? Really, John?
Probably not as good as you, but yes.
Okay, that's awesome. So when that's one of the first things that helped me, besides the gospel, and I ask kids, Hannah believed that thought. She believed it was true that nobody liked her. Nobody likes you. Is that true? Can you absolutely know that that is true? And anything that hurts, we know is not true. We just know. Because then we take it back to the gospel, and we know that the Spirit is peace, love, gentleness, comfort. So if you're thinking a thought, the problem is when you're a teenager, you believe everything you think. And even adults believe, they have to believe that what they're thinking is true. So when we teach any kind of prevention, we talk about that, don't we?
Yeah.
That people feel like they're a burden. Mm-hmm. Nobody likes them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We hear it all the time.
Right? We do. We do.
So in the car accident, and I hate to keep backing up, but in the car accident, when she was 15, mm-hmm. you saw an immediate kind of a change right then.
Yeah, that was the shift.
It's really when it amped up and you
time.
started to see it. And I mean, you talk about she's a teenage girl.
Right.
So hormones are kind of all over the place with our teenagers. And we talk about the frontal lobe, not being completely developed. And so because of that, you look at teenagers and you say, okay, yeah, they're not making rational decisions. They're, you go down the list and describe the teenager perfectly, but you add on the brain injury. And I could see where that would be really a hard place as a parent because we didn't know about the brain injuries, not the way that we talk about it now, the concussions. But when you see the behavior of a teenager, I think a lot of times we pass it off as she's just being a teenager. And I think that's got to be really hard.
I saw it. She complained of headaches, so that was a good signal that there was severe headaches. So we took her to IHC, and the neurologist there who did an evaluation, he said, get her somewhere where she can be without electronics, without anything. So I have friends that had a place down in St. George. They let us use that. For 2 weeks we went down there, and she was really, really good about staying off her phone. And that was in the late spring. And when we came back, it was summer, so there was not a whole lot of pressure on her brain. And she did fine pretty much through the summer. She seemed like she was getting better, all these indications. She couldn't even have it. We were referred to Corgett. He's a Dr. Corgett, neurologist, neuropsychologist in Layton. But he wouldn't even see her until she was 16. So that was in October. So summer seemed to be pretty good. Went back to school. The pressure on her brain to learn, the feeling of being inadequate started building up. And then taking time, it took forever to get into Corgett. We set an appointment, couldn't get in until right before Christmas. So after her 16th birthday. Was it Christmas? No, it was March. Yeah, we had everything all done in March. But in the meantime, that's when she had to come home and be home in hospital. And that was embarrassing to her. It was really embarrassing. The fact that she says, Mom, I keep on telling the same stories over and over again. And I said, well, I'm okay with that.
When you had said doing the math problems.
Yeah,
so it was... You had recognized, hey, right from the get-go, this is from that accident.
Oh, yeah, it was really obvious. Plus, she'd had several. She was a martial artist. I will send you a picture that you can put up with this.
I would like that.
Yeah. And
I remember you telling me that, too.
Yeah, she was a martial artist, and she was almost to her black belt. She was... I use this example sometimes when I teach, is that people will say, especially in the older crowds, that you're just being weak, that you're just using this for attention, you're weak-minded, you just should be stronger. Well, I have examples of Hannah winning against girls that were 50 pounds heavier than her, almost being taken out, and coming back just by using her brain and her mind power and her will and her vision and everything, and coming in and just... Taking the ribbon. Wow. Yeah. She was amazing. Her brain, she was going to be my lawyer. You can feel sorry for me too. She was amazing. She was so smart, so gifted and beautiful. But I tell parents, it's like looking at a homeless person and thinking, you want to be homeless. It's your fault you're there. Okay, we all grew up to want to be homeless. Yeah, that's how it works. I'm usually not that sarcastic when I'm teaching. But what I'll say is and especially with kids, if someone is talking about suicide and you think that they are just doing it for attention, then they need attention.
Yeah, give it to them.
Yep.
And what does it hurt?
Nothing.
And you talk about, saying that people are taking the easy way out, or they're, this and that. We have a common friend, Taryn, and Taryn described it better than I've ever heard. And to kids, you can't describe it because September 11th happened.
Oh, I know exactly what
they're
you're
learning
do.
about it, but yeah.
This example came to me right away.
Yeah, and I'll let you tell it if you.
No, it's a burning building, and you have the option of standing in that room and burning, or jumping out of a 50-story building.
Yeah.
And your only option to possibly live, is to jump out of that building.
Yeah, and we're sitting there. We're sitting in our living room. For me, we were sitting in the family room, and we were watching that TV set on September 11th, and you're watching the smoke come out of those buildings, and you start to see people jump from the buildings. And I found out they later went in and documented that from cameras, there was over 200 people that jumped on September 11th. Wow. And we're sitting there watching this burning building. We know it's bad, but we really don't know what's going on. And so I always tell people, when you look at somebody that's struggling, picture those towers and understand we don't know what's going on inside. And they're weighing their options. It's the fight or flight, weighing their options. What's my best option at this point? And if you have a brain injury, that limits your ability to think. But even with mental illness,
same thing.
You're limited, and it's almost like your blinders on, and you're ultra focused on the problem. I always tell people, it's like, have you ever had a toothache? You've got a toothache, you're trying to get into the dentist. I can go to work, for instance, with a toothache, and I can get through the day because my mind's doing other things. Nothing is worse than the pain of a toothache when you're laying in bed, and it's the only thing that you can focus on. And
that's a great example.
And I think it really is the way our mind works.
Can I just say really quick that Hannah had to be busy for that very reason. She had to stay distracted. She was always doing something, always trying to. And there are some kids that'll just stay in the room and isolate and focus on the phone and so forth. But for that very reason, kids
need that distraction.
Or they self-medicate.
Yeah.
It's not the drugs. She started self-medicating. She knew drugs weren't good for her, and especially for her damaged brain, right? And I'm a recovered alcoholic, and yes, I said recovered. Now I'm a foodaholic, which is not recovered yet, but I am a recovered alcoholic.
Well, we don't even want to go down my list of problems. So.
Right? You see how that works? But I was very patient because she came to me, Mom, I'm smoking pot. Well, I knew exactly why she was smoking pot. Yeah. And I was like, let's figure out why you're doing that. Let's talk about what's going on. Because I tell kids, and of course I work with kids primarily, and sometimes with adults, but mostly with kids. And I tell them that drugs are a slow numb, and suicide is a permanent numb.
Yeah, and that's true. And I think the statistics, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they say that only 2 out of 5 people actually seek the medical help for the answers to.
Well, I didn't know
to numb the pain. But that 2 out of 5 is doing it the correct way, trying to get the medical help. Yeah. The other 3 are self-medicating. Yeah. And unfortunately, in our uneducated, as far as medicine goes, most of the time we're self-medicating with depressants.
Right. Right.
Alcohol's a depressant.
Right.
Pot is a depressant. Yeah. So they're doing the best they can with what they've been given.
Right, what they know.
And
what they have access to.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I wish that
Or nicotine. Nicotine is it numbs you.
Yeah. And there's so many of them. You know, we've had on this podcast, even porn. I mean,
right.
Any type of addiction,
Thanks
whatever you do,
Mm-hmm.
it's to escape reality,
Right.
to numb the pain and take your mind off of what you're dealing with. And unfortunately, I wish there was an easier way.
So one of the things that Live Hannah's Hope does, and let me tell you why the name is, because people always want to say Hannah's Hope, and thank goodness that name wasn't available, because that's what I would have done, because it's so easy. But one of her online names was Live Urban Love, and we loved words in our family, and so live is active, right?
Yeah.
To do it, right?
Yep.
Life is worth living. That is very now. And Hannah's hope was that she could be free of her painful thoughts.
Yeah.
So all these painful thoughts, like we were talking before, that bring us down, that we're believing, that we believe that we're no good, we believe that we're a burden, we believe that we're a burden. So not true.
No. I
would have done anything for Hannah. But she did feel like a burden. She even talked about that in her note.
Yeah.
And there's nothing, I mean, I guess she could have looked at us and seen our sorrow and our sadness, and I thought a great deal about that. But I would have done anything for her. She wasn't a burden.
And she knows that.
She knows that now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stinker.
And unfortunately, in her doing the best she can with what she was given, and she had some real issues that life had handed her that, I mean, she was trying to work through those. And I think the moment that she was free from that, you get that instant knowledge of exactly where things were. You know what I mean?
My experience with Hannah, with that, was it wasn't instant.
No.
Probably not something I want to talk about right here.
Understand.
But I will tell you, by the next morning, she was healed.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just me being able to see that. It just was. And so you're right. She's fine.
Yeah.
She's fine. She's doing great. I had people try and tell me that she was miserable and that she felt bad, and I'm like, no, she doesn't. She does not. She doesn't. She has a godly sorrow, like loving us and concerned about us, but her perspective is so much different than it was, and she is very much healed. I guess one of the things that Live Hannah's Hope does is I do facilitate the work with any teenager and even with adults. I ask for a donation from adults, but for teenagers, it's always free, and it can be done in my house. It can be done online. Done a lot of work on Zoom and on whatever else. Lately, Messenger has been pretty amazing, pretty easy. But it's a real simple tool that I teach these kids that they can turn around and use for a lifetime. It's not something that they have to come to me, that they become dependent on me. They change their thoughts. They're able to, he shouldn't have done that. Okay, well, let's go look at that moment. He shouldn't have done that. Is that true? Can you really know that that's true? And what happens when you believe that? How do you react? What happens inside of you? How do you treat yourself when you believe he shouldn't have done that? How do you treat him when you believe he shouldn't have done that? Who would you be if you couldn't believe he shouldn't have done that? Without fail, it's relieved and at peace. And then you turn it around. He should have done that. Can you find reasons why he should have done that? he shouldn't have yelled at me. He should have yelled at me. Well, I was kind of being a brat. Maybe he should have yelled at me, And you look at all the different situations, and before long, you're just flipped right out of it. And you see different sides of things, and you find peace, and you find truth, you find forgiveness.
Just kind of look at it from every angle, huh?
Yeah, at the same time, giving yourself, I hold space for people that they can investigate the pain.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be full on. You don't have to feel, just whatever comes up, and it usually only is 2 or 3 minutes, and they're done, especially kids. Yeah. They're pretty quick,
wow.
And then they're on with it. But the whole point of that is how to process thinking. It's really like DBT, only a heck of a lot cheaper.
Way cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
So, can we back up?
Do anything you want. It's your podcast. I should have warned you that I will talk and talk and talk.
No, I'm glad, but okay. I kind of want to back up and talk about some real good that has come because of you.
Because of us.
Yes, because of both of you.
Well, because of you and because of a lot of people. So nothing ever happens in a vacuum.
Well, you were instrumental in, we had tried to get the SafeUT app out. The SafeUT app failed the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And the second time, we've had this discussion with others, but you were able to share your story.
Right.
And in doing so,
with good legislators, with good that I had built relationships with the senators. I handed each one of them a short letter that was, please pass this. This is why we need this. And they responded. And I can't remember what the number was, but it was pretty high passage.
Yeah.
I didn't keep track of that.
And that, I featured Senator Thatcher on this podcast, I don't know, in the last 6 episodes anyway. And
great guy.
And we talked about the SafeUT app. We talked about the number of lives that is saved.
Wow, yeah.
And
it was his idea.
Yeah. And without your story, though.
Right, but it always takes, that's how good legislation works. I never wanted to be the story. I was always the citizen lobbyist behind it, the advocate.
Yeah.
They came up with the idea, and then I'd go find people for the story. Like when we did the anti-bullying or the parental notification bill, mm-hmm. I pulled in a lady that had just, her son had just died 3 months before from suicide. I didn't even realize what I was doing, but he'd been so bullied. So she was wanting to do something positive with that. So I put her in front of the camera. I put my kids in front of the camera. I didn't want anything to do with the camera. I didn't want anything to do with even the credit. I just I just knew that with good legislation, took a good legislation thought through and a story. Now I'm the story.
Yeah. Well, we had a problem in Utah that there were so many numbers being used.
Right. Oh, and then Hannah's bill.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm leading you to. But share with me how that kind of came about, if you don't mind.
It wasn't me. It wasn't me. I was purely used as a story. And by then, I had been on featured on so many programs and newspapers and so forth, and involved in so many other pieces of legislation that Representative Elison, who is amazing, as you know.
Absolutely.
He called me and he said, Laura, I'm going to do this legislation, and can I use Hannah as an example?
What was your initial thought to that? Sure.
And so I sure. I trust him so much, and I trust the legislature so much that anything I can't imagine them doing anything that would be harmful or wrong. The hard part I had with that is I'm so conservative that everything that I've ever passed hasn't had any fiscal note attached to it. That means it didn't take money. I expect people to just give, right?
Yeah.
And things take money. So that's my downfall. I have a hard time asking for money, But so there was one difficult thing about that was that it had money attached to it, a bill attached to it. But what he did was he, behind my back, they all went together, and in the house, they give citations to people. They honor people. Now, people like Taryn deserve that. Oh, yeah. Okay? They do great things, and they serve for a long time. But what they did is they surprised me. My own legislator was in on it. He had me come in and sit when they read the bill so I could be on the floor. You have to be asked to do that, and it's special permission. Not anybody can just sit on the floor with the legislators. And then they gave me a citation that was signed by everybody. Wow. And that was amazing. That meant to me, when I was younger, I always wanted to be noticed. I always wanted to have acknowledgement. And I stopped that, ironically, when I started doing legislation, because I realized that I could get so much more done when I didn't worry about me. Now, I have learned how to take care of me too. See, I taught Hannah that. So I can also be here and be sad, and, I can do that too. But to have that acknowledged, to have, even though I'm not a legislator, and there is a huge difference. And once you're a part of that family, you're a part of a family, and you've seen that. You know that we're on the outside. We're appreciated, but we're on the outside. To be acknowledged by people that I have so much admiration for was just outstanding to me, and that Hannah's life meant something.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was going to say, I can't think of anything from 2014 to now that's had the impact of the SafeUT app.
No, that was huge. I think the Emmy, I don't think we hear about that.
No,
but I think
that has.
Yes, I think the two together, because what's the point of? Yeah. The statistics are everything. We're learning that right now. Bad statistics, bad outcome.
But if we all continue in this fight and try to make a difference, I think that's really what it's about. And if somebody had told you 10 years ago that you'd be doing this, you probably wouldn't have even.
No.
Yeah.
No, I was fighting year-round school.
Yeah. And so what a blessing you have been to the state, to suicide prevention, to use a story that is a hard story. I mean, that really is a hard story. And it's nothing that you want to have to focus on. And
I'm an outward griever.
Yeah.
So that works for me. Everybody grieves differently. My husband's very private. But it helps, it heals, because I know that we're learning from it, and she didn't die in vain, and God could have healed her, and he didn't. So there's a reason. I'm like, heck, if I was going to mess that up.
Yeah. You're pretty awesome. So
what do we do to prevent? We ask a question. We notice people. We're not therapists, right? We want to do a QPR thing too. What do we want to do?
Well, you know what I had said when I had Taryn here, sitting here, I said, wouldn't it be great if we could just teach empathy? If we could teach people to notice people.
Yeah. If
we could teach people, and I tell this story sometimes when I'm teaching QPR, but here we've had all this training, and we know what to do. And there was a day when, and this has probably been 5 years ago, Tracy and I were at the local Albertsons, and we'd gone in. You don't take a guy to a grocery store. We want in, we want out, we want to go home. It's just the necessary evil. Okay, load up. Let's get the stuff and let's get out of here. And I remember as we were walking through those doors, you've got the road that you cross in the parking lot there. And as I walked out, there was a woman sitting up on the little ledge, and she was sobbing. And I won't point any fingers, but this idiot walked straight across the road, wanted to get the stuff in the car and go home. And I probably was 3/4, if not all the way across that initial street, when I looked back and my wife wasn't behind me. And I turned around and here's my wife sitting on that ledge with her arm around the lady asking if she was okay. And I thought, this is what we teach. And yet I missed the opportunity. Luckily I had Tracy with me and she didn't miss the opportunity. But how often do we not want to kind of get involved and we don't want to have that awkward conversation with somebody we might not know?
Never.
Yeah. Never.
I always do.
Never now.
Right.
And so I think.
But you're a guy too, and I wouldn't be so hard on yourself because it might have really freaked her out if you'd walk over and done that. But Tracy was a perfect person. And it was. And it happened the way it was supposed to. Yeah. But yeah, your point's well taken.
But couldn't we figure out a way? I mean, there's no easy button, right, to do this. But wouldn't it be great if all of us could stop being so focused on maybe ourselves and actually notice others?
Take signs seriously too. I've taught groups of nurses and had horrific stories of nurses going and telling their supervisors, knowing that, hey, such is suicidal, and the supervisor is just blowing it off, and the next day the person killing themselves. You know, I mean, it's and yet I get so many. So people call me all the time, and I'm okay with that. I'm not a hotline, but you can find me at Laura M. Warburton on Facebook, and I have Live Hannah's Hope on Facebook. I'm on Instagram, mostly as Laura Warburton. But just reaching out and saying, you know, what do I do? I just this week, a girl in our ward who works at McCady, who had a best friend who works in the behavioral health unit, 18 as a CNA, sits with suicidal people. Her best friend was suicidal, and she didn't know what to do. And she didn't even know to call me, and I'm in her ward. And she knows a lady there that I've sat with quite often and went and taught classes up at Weber State where she was in class. And she's like, well, why don't you get a hold of Laura Warburton? And this girl was like, oh my gosh, she's in my ward. Yeah. Well, then even then she had a hard time calling me. There's a long history there. She's a darling girl, but I scare her to death because I'm so forward. So her mom called me, and her mom is wonderful. And we had this great conversation. I have these great information pieces on my website of how, you know, what do I do for prevention? And it kind of goes through a QPR, a really mini one that really helps people know what to say and what not to say really quick. And I sent that to her and I said, you read this and then call me if you have questions. And they did what I told them to do. And besides that, and the girl is okay right now. Wow. But here is this girl who works for McCady as a CNA in the BHU.
That you would think
would have, and I asked her, have you had training? No.
Really?
So I'm going to have a conversation about that soon.
Yeah, that's definitely something that needs to be looked into. Yeah. Wow.
So we just are resistant. I think there's everything in us that doesn't even want to, it doesn't want to even look at somebody killing themselves, because in order to understand how someone feels, you have to be able to find it in yourself. And no one really wants to go there. So can we talk about right now? And I mean, last year we had our suicide numbers went down.
Yeah.
You know, and for sure our state lowered in statistics, you know, compared to other states. Mm-hmm. I have no idea what's going to happen after all this. But so what do we do? What do we do to help people know that it's going to be okay? Things change.
Well, you know, and I kind of the example that I use And I don't know if it's a good one or not. You'll have to tell me. But
Sure, it's great.
as far as a guy goes,
Okay.
the mind of me, right? That's scary.
No, it's beautiful.
But
He's wonderful. Okay, they already know
But I
that.
always think about this. I always think, as a kid, as a teenager, I would get strep throat a lot. And every year I'd get it once or twice, and it was miserable. And most guys don't ever want to go to a doctor. They don't want to. They don't want to. You know, you got to be pretty sick to get a guy to a doctor, right? When I would go into the doctor, it was because I thought, I can't take this anymore. I'm miserable. I mean, it was, you know, for a guy, it's a cold, you know. We get a cold and we think that we're dying. But there was something magical. I'm allergic to penicillin, so I'd go in and they would give me the Z-Pack. There's something magical to me about going in. You feel horrible. And the doctor isn't a magician, but he looks at me, he says, yep, he takes swab, you've got strep throat. I'm going to prescribe you a Z-Pack. You know, you take 2 pills the first day and then 1 pill a day, 5 days, you're better. There's something to just knowing that there's light at the end of the tunnel. I can go home, and some reason is I'd leave the doctor's office, I'd feel better than when I went to the doctor's office. And I really believe it had to do with just knowing
You had a plan.
that pill was going to fix it.
You had a plan.
Yeah. And so I think,
A plan to live.
yeah, and I think really just knowing, and we talk about this a lot, the average person goes through 6 bouts of real depression in their lifetime.
I didn't know that.
And I think knowing that, life's a little bit of a roller coaster.
Yeah, expectations.
And when you're going down, if you just know, hey, this is going to happen a few times in your lifetime. We don't know what the cause will be, how long it will last. But we're talking real depression, not just having a bad day. I think, to me, for me personally, just having the knowledge that, yeah, you're going to go through this a few times. If I'm going through it and I think it's bad, I'm going to be like, but I'm going to get through it because there's going to be a few more times I'm going to feel this way.
This is 3.
Yeah.
I've already made it through 2. Okay,
And
good.
if you're at 7, maybe there's going to.
No.
But
When you get to 6, you know you're done.
but I think we have to be
I love that.
honest about the outcomes. Now, something that was in the news probably 4 weeks ago, about a month ago, California released some of their numbers,
On what?
they said
On suicide?
in attempts.
No, that's interesting that they would do that.
So a month ago they released and they said, due to COVID, the last 4 weeks we have seen more suicide attempts than the previous year. So that tells me the attempts were 12 times what they averaged. And so while we don't have those numbers here in Utah, or somebody may, but we don't have them, right? I would have to think that is something that we're seeing maybe even worldwide right now with this pandemic. But I think we have to realize that, you know what? It's the unknown that scares us. It's the unknown of how long is this going to last? How bad is it if you get it? And I think the thing that we have to stick to is the things that we know. We're going to get through this. We're going to get through it. They've gotten through all the pandemics before. We'll get through this one. And life might be a little bit different. And I think that the unknown is what causes the problems. And so if we just realize, you know what? There are people there that can help. We'll get through it. And just know that it is going to be a short period of time. You know, it's almost like talking to kids in school with bullying. You brought up bullying. If you look at the average lifespan is 80 plus years, and school's this little blip in it. And usually the bullying, that's the peak of it. It's when you're in school, right? Knowing that you're going to have all these years where that's not going to be at the forefront of your mind. So I think knowledge is the thing that, for me, makes a difference. Sorry, I didn't mean to ramble.
No, that's perfect. I think that's really good. It reminds me of my mindfulness practice.
Yeah.
Of not only knowing that, noticing that I've gone through something and that I can go through something. So like with the death of a child, nothing gets to me. Nothing can be as bad as what I've gone through. Nothing gets to me. Maybe losing my husband would be worse. But right now, I'm not gonna fantasize about that. Anxiety is thinking about the future with doubts and with fears. So I don't have to do that. I don't have to think about the future because I'm not a prophet and I'm not a God. I have no idea. If I did, I'd probably make a lot of money somehow, but I don't. But what I love about mindfulness and Davis Behavioral Health is wonderful with this. I've taken so many courses from them, and I teach. I'm available to teach. I don't currently teach, but in the work we teach it too as mindfulness practices, which is just noticing right now.
Yeah.
Like right now, we're just sitting here. I don't even know if a virus exists right now. Do you?
No.
No. And how nice is this?
Yeah.
I mean, I've got water. It's peaceful. It's quiet. Now is good.
It is.
Now is good. And maybe you're right. Maybe sometimes now is not so good. But there's always, you notice that things, you're right. As you said that beautifully. I can't even rephrase it. It was perfect.
Well, and I think the one thing that we can do is we know that there are people that are struggling, right? Mm-hmm. There are people that were struggling before the pandemic, mm-hmm. and this might just
push them over.
Yeah. And so I think what all of us could do, and I'm calling out everybody that's listening to this, is be watchful.
Right.
Be aware.
Yeah.
Pay attention to those around you. Don't be afraid to ask the question.
Right. And how do you ask? I mean, if you don't know how to ask, call us.
Yeah.
Get in touch with both of us. We're here. We'll tell you how to do it. Or we'll show you how to put the SafeUT app on the phone, and show you how to use it. And I'll make the phone call to your friend.
Yeah.
I'll reach out. I'll text.
Yeah.
To anybody.
And we've got the lifeline, and I tell mm-hmm. people this every week. Mm-hmm. If you don't have that person that is close enough to you mm-hmm. that you can actually have that honest conversation, reach out. Call 1-800-273-8255. Call the lifeline because mm-hmm. they are trained. Right. They are there 24/7, 365 days a year.
It's the same people that are on the SafeUT app, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I know I didn't tell her this going into this, but we're being heard in 13 countries.
Oh.
And we are...
Sorry that I can't speak any other language than English.
I can't even speak English, so you're good. But yeah, for those of you that aren't in Utah, just know that number will get you to the lifeline. There's always someone there that's willing to listen. And I think that's what we've just got to do as we go through the remainder of 2020 and maybe even into 2021, if mm-hmm. that's what it requires. Let's all try to be vigilant and be watchful and be aware of people. And like I said, I wished I could just instantly teach empathy. That's the one thing that I wished I had a little less of.
Yeah. Because
the one thing that for me personally, is I feel what people feel.
Mm-hmm. I do too.
And then I start tearing up, mm-hmm. and I get that way, and I always think, just once I want to look like Clint Eastwood. I don't want to have tears in my eyes, but you know what it is? It's who I am. And we all got to work with what we have. But if we were watchful and mindful, I think we could make such a difference. And everybody's got a unique journey.
Yep.
Everybody's got something that they're going through that we may or may not be aware of.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's okay that we're all unique.
My biggest problem is that I'm like a guy. I want to fix you. I had to learn how not to do that, just to hold a space. And so just listening to people and not harshly judging. We all judge. Yeah. I mean, well, let's be real here. We all judge, but we don't have to be harsh about it.
Yeah.
We can be gentle and share our own personal experiences.
And I think that comes with time. It comes with age. I notice that I do less of it now than I did, and I think it's part of my journey, part of your journey.
Yeah.
And so I am so thankful for you coming tonight. I really am. I hope you know that.
I do. I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful that you're doing this. I'd love to learn how to do this sometime, maybe, kind of, maybe not. I don't know.
But we could find somebody to show us because you see how low tech I am. But tell people how they can find Live Hannah's Hope.
It's just on the internet. Live Hannah's Hope. It's LIVEHANNAH, so old-fashioned Hannah, and S, because it's Hannah's, plural, Hope, HOPE.org. And we have a resilience award that I actually have taken down right now because we're not doing it this year, and so I didn't want applications, but we give away $500 scholarship, for kids 15 in the state of Utah, for seniors, and they need to write in their story of resilience, of how they overcame difficult things. Some amazing stories. So you can find all those stories on my website. You can also leave your story, share your story. Your story is important, but you can do that anonymously. Matter of fact, it's completely anonymous. I don't even know who you are. The only way that people would know who you are is if you put your name and information in your story, in the body of the story. So a lot of neat stories of resilience and recovery, because that's really what it's about. It's about that we all have things that we go through and that we get through them. And sometimes it's hard, but we do it and we can do it together. There's other resources. I've got lots of resources. Every resource that's available, every major resource that's available in Utah. And then, of course, national resources. So I got to get Life's Worth Living on there. I just realized I don't think I have you on there.
I'm hurt. That's it. We're canceling this. No, I'm just joking.
Okay. Canceled.
No, I love what you're doing.
Oh, and we also have, because I have had such a hard time finding therapists, you can write in your therapy, your person that you go to your therapist, and refer them, and I will put that information with your recommendation on there.
Oh, that's way cool.
Also anonymous, so helpful, yeah.
I was going to say, because we get a lot of calls for that.
Yeah. So if people already are using somebody and they really like them, I always say, hey, send me their information and we'll get it on.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, so that's on there.
And the Resilience Awards, I got to go with you a year or two ago, and
they
what a neat thing, though. What a cool thing. Yeah. And this year has been odd. We normally give some scholarships as well. Yeah. And with the way that school was this year, not one person put in for it, and that's a shame. But we're going to get back to normal. Yeah, we're going to get there, and we're going to continue to do what we do, and we're going to do the best we can. But I appreciate you so much. I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate you being willing to drive here tonight. And
I like you too, John. A lot.
I appreciate you.
Appreciate you too. So,
again, go ahead and visit that website, livehannahshope.org. Mm-hmm. And you can find her on Facebook, Instagram.
Laura M. Warburton. Warburton, which is actually, And
I'll put that in the show notes and stuff. But I'll tell you what, the reason that we started this podcast was because I wanted to share those friendships that I have with people that are doing amazing things. And you've been on that list. I've had you on this wish list of people that I could have come and be part of this. And so I'm grateful for you taking the time and sharing your story. I know that your story and Hannah's story has made a difference and it has saved lives. And while that doesn't bring Hannah back, it has made a difference to a lot of families that hopefully didn't have to endure what you've had to endure. And so I thank you for each one of those people. But thank you again for all you do. And thanks for coming back and watching another episode. If you want to find out more about Life's Worth Living, visit lifesworthlivingfoundation.org. And again, we're on Facebook and all social media outlets as well. And thanks for being part of this. I don't know what brought us together tonight. I'm so grateful that you're here and that you listen to this podcast. If you know somebody that you think this story could help, please share it. It is so easy to share, and it will get to the right people. And let's all take that challenge, and let's use this time during COVID to be more aware of those people that are around us and show some love. And I know that it'll make a difference. And thank you for you being here tonight. And we'll see you next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John.